What is going on, gunfighters? Welcome back to Gunfighter Life, the podcast where we talk about gunfighting the right way with Judeo-Christian values and real-world first-hand experience. Today we're going to be talking about a few different cartridges. If you've listened for a while, you're probably familiar with the Better Know a cartridge where we talk about one. Maybe we'll mention a few others, but today we're really going to be talking about a few different cartridges and how they compare, those being the good old 270, the 270 WSM, and the 6.8 Western. Alright, so with that, I'll plug in the bio, and then we'll get into the main topic. If you want more, goodshepherdtraining.com. Who am I? A question we should all ask ourselves. I am, first and foremost, a servant of God, made in His very own image, a follower of Jesus Christ, a simple man called by God to the Great Commission to share the good news of Jesus Christ. Next, a little bit about my background and what God has allowed me to do and bless me to do in life. Grew up what most would consider very poor in the backwoods of the southeastern and mid-Atlantic United States, hunting and fishing. Joined the Marine Corps at 17. Did a couple of combat tours in Iraq. So a decorated Marine Corps combat veteran. Infantry assaultman. After the combat tours, I was an urban warfare instructor for the United States Marine Corps under Mojave Viper. I also served in the U.S. Army, both full-time and part-time National Guard. Also a veteran of law enforcement. I served with LAPD. I was a sworn peace officer, a cop for LAPD. I worked regular patrol assignments and more specialized assignments. One of those more specialized assignments was warrant service, fugitive recovery. Also had some other law enforcement roles. I am an FBI certified firearms instructor and been certified by another 3-letter government agency in a lot of firearms and training things. I've also been a private contractor, worked in the private sector, pertaining to tactics and gunfighting and protecting America from enemies foreign and domestic. I served as the commander of a tactical team to stop active shooters in a large metropolitan area. That was our primary mission, to stop active shooters, which sadly are a thing in America today. I've also been blessed to do quite a bit of competition shooting. Started my first formal competitions even before joining the Marine Corps at 17. I had won more shooting competitions than I can remember. I have competed in all manner of disciplines in shooting. I've been blessed to be a state rifle and pistol champion, West Coast regional champion. Like I said, been blessed to win more shooting competitions than I can remember. Mentioned hunting. I've hunted to put meat on the table starting when I was a child. I've also been a professional big game hunter and guide, hunting and slaying all manner of beast. And I don't apologize for that. Humbled to be the host of 3 podcasts. Simple Man Sermons, Alpha Male Podcast, and Gunfighter Life. Obviously, as things not mentioned, I've been blessed to do many other things. But, again, first and foremost, I'm a servant of God, a believer and follower of the Bible, the Word, Jesus Christ. And I don't apologize for that. With that, let's transition into today's topic. So I'll give you guys a little insight on how this episode got started. I was thinking about cartridges and good cartridges, and I was thinking mostly about the 270 WSM. Well, it would be hard to talk about that without talking about the 270 quite a bit, and it would be hard to talk about that without talking about the new kid on the block, the 6.8 Western. With that, let's get into a basic understanding of the 270. So the 30-06 developed from the 30-03 way back at the turn of the century. Well over 100 years old. Some entrepreneurs and hunters, riflemen, they thought, this 30-06 is great, but if we neck it down, that's taking an original cartridge and putting a smaller caliber projectile, caliber being a bullet diameter. If you don't know, quick aside, caliber is just the bullet diameter and fractions of an inch and decimal points of an inch. So a 50 caliber, 0.50 is a half an inch. 25 caliber, 0.25 is a quarter of an inch. The 270 is 0.277, if you care. They thought, what if we take this good old 30-06 and neck it down to 0.277 caliber? And hence the 270 is born. And this was way back in the 1920s, so not long after the 30-06 was introduced, a couple of decades afterwards, they necked it down to the 270. And I'm still a little unclear as to why they chose .277. It seems like an odd choice because, as far as I'm aware, there weren't really any other bullets in that caliber at the time, or at least I'm not aware of any. Anyway, they did, and it was a good cartridge. It still is a good cartridge, especially for deer size and shaped game, let's say. Deer, elk, things like that. It is phenomenal, especially as a Western cartridge. Now, there's few exceptions, but east of the Mississippi, and that's where I grew up in the South, it's rare to be able to see and shoot a deer over 300 yards. Now, if you're a farmer and you have access to a lot of big bean fields and stuff, yeah, that's a thing. But for most people, most hunters, especially public land and stuff back east, it's rare to get a shot past 300 yards. And inside of 300 yards, really the difference between a 30-06 and a 270 is kind of academic. But out west, I'm in Idaho right now. I have lived in Idaho, not recently, I just came back, but I've lived here for years and years. Did a ton of hunting out here. I've also hunted quite a bit out west. And out west, yeah, you can get long shots. So for longer shots, the 270 I think does pretty much beat the 30-06, at least when it comes to like point blank range. Meaning the range I can aim at the center of a deer and hit a good kill shot on a deer. I think a 270 does shine. So for decades and decades and decades, right, the 270 was a good deer hunting cartridge, and again, it still is. Well, back in the 50s, right, the military looked at the 30-06 and said, it's a good round, we like it, but it can be more efficient. This round came out, way back when, smokeless powder was kind of in an infancy in the early aughts, in the mid-aughts, the 19-aught something. Smokeless powder wasn't what it is today. We can make this cartridge more efficient. And that's what they try to do, save a little bit of weight, save a little bit of space, and hence the 308. And the 308 became vastly popular, and so did its necking up and necking down options. It was more efficient. And a reason it's more efficient is a short, fat case. A short, fat case tends to be more efficient. It burns the powder, just let's say, more efficiently, and you can look at physics and stuff to figure out why that is. Well, I don't remember when this craze started, but let's say the mid-2000s, there was a big craze on the short cartridges. A couple of them are really good, a couple of them are but my favorite that kind of fell by the wayside, sadly, is a 223 WSSM super short mag. There was a 243 super short mag. There was a bunch. One of the ones that came out was the 270 Winchester short mag. The 270 WSM, the 270 Wisdom, whatever you want to call it, but the 270 Winchester Short Magnum. So this 270 Wisdom came out, and the whole idea is it's a short action, so it's a shorter, more efficient cartridge. And it's basically, for all intents and purposes, I know it's called the Magnum, but let me pull out the trusty Hornady reloading manual. The classic, iconic loading for a 270 Winchester traditionally is a 130 grain bullet. That's like your classic deer cartridge. Yeah, some people like heavier stuff, but let's stick with that. You're 130, right? And you're launching with your good old 270 designed in the 1920s, 130 grain bullet at 3,100 feet a second, at least per this reloading manual. Now let's look at the 270 WSM, right? You're launching that same 130 grain bullet at 3,200 feet a second. 100 feet a second, if you're talking a 3,100 or 3,200, really the difference is academic. I know it's called a Magnum. It's 100 feet a second faster, but that's 0.0 whatever of a percentage point difference. So the big advantage here is not that it's more powerful. The big advantage, if you want to call it a big advantage, is that it's more efficient. It fits into a shorter case and a shorter rifle, right? So there's much ado about short action versus long action. And I'm here to tell you I don't know how much a difference it makes. I would love to, one day get a bunch of patrons together and or a GoFundMe and buy like a Savage Axis base model or a Savage 110 and a 270 and a 270 WSM. Put the same optic on them and run a mad minute, meaning how many shots can I fire at a given target, let's say at 300 meters, in a minute and get good solid hits on target. And does it really make a difference whether I am running the long action or short action? Does it really make that much of a difference? I'm here to tell you, for the things these cartridges were intended for hunting, where the target is likely going to moving between your first and second shot if you have to take a second shot at all, the difference is probably academic there too. But I'm a big guy on weight. I like to hike a lot and hunt hard and scout a lot and spot and stalk hunt. So a short action will be lighter. And again, the powder burn is more efficient. And you're getting it in a short action. And then we got to talk about the new kid on the block, the 6.8 Western. And this wasn't born in a vacuum either. In the last, let's say, decade, with the advent of affordable laser rangefinders and more computers coming into shooting and optics and all that stuff, long-range shooting has really taken off. And for long-range shooting, it's kind of a misconception. You don't necessarily want or need a very flat shooting cartridge. Look at, the 6.5 Creedmoor. It's not very flat compared to a much older cartridge like the, 264 Win Mag. What you want is a predictable cartridge with a long, sleek bullet with high BCs. That's predictable, and it bucks the wind very well. Now, people have been doing this for a while. I remember this, being a thing a little bit earlier with the 6.5 284. I remember that being a kind of a high-end, long-range cartridge before the 6.5 Creedmoor. However, I do think we have to credit the 6.5 Creedmoor with making it common and making it accessible to the common man to shoot these long ranges. That, coupled with really the advent of cheap laser rangefinders and precision rifles that were affordable, like the Ruger Precision Rifle and things like that, this really became its own thing, as opposed to a very niche, very high-end thing. The common man, with some basic computers and not even great, but let's say decent fundamentals, can go out and make hits at 1,000 yards or more with these efficient cartridges. Well, we mentioned the 6.5 Creedmoor, and you started getting a bunch of these, high proficiency cartridges with long BC bullets. You start seeing like the 6.5 PRC, you start seeing the 300 PRC, the 28 Nosler, a bunch of these, right? Well, just I think maybe last year before, some entrepreneur thought, a lot of people love the 270. How can we get these people to spend more money and buy a new cartridge? And maybe that's not fair, right? I don't know what they were thinking. But they might have been thinking, how do we take the greatness of the 270 and make it long range with these high BC bullets? Now, most of your old traditional 270s have a twist rate that's meant to twist these standard bullets, because that's what everybody shot back then, right? Before laser rangefinders, it wasn't really an issue. So they're generally, and if you don't know, a twist rate, it's the amount that a bullet twists going down the barrel. So let's say a 1 in 12 is real easy. It's 12 inches is a foot. So that bullet makes one rotation in the barrel every foot. gyroscopic stabilization. It spins it enough. The longer the bullet is, though, the faster you have to spin it to stabilize it. So a lot of those older 270s will have a twist rate that's not sufficient for a long, high BC bullet. And if you want to see what I'm talking about here, go look up a picture of like 150, let's say 130 grain. That's the most traditional 270 bullet versus like 150 versus a 6.8 Western with 165 grain bullet. You're just looking at them, not even being a physicist, you'll see that one looks a lot more sleeker than the other, right? Which means it's going to fly through the air. Again, more streamlined, more predictably. It'll buck the wind better, and it'll carry more energy longer. So if you're shooting at these really long ranges, they decided, why don't we do this with the 6.8 Western? An efficient cartridge, but with the case bumped back a little bit like the 6.5 Creedmoor to load these longer bullets in these guns. And you get the 6.8 Western. 6.8 is a metric designation, just like you can measure bullets in two different ways, in millimeters, 9mm, or in caliber, .355 caliber, right? And a lot of cartridges are named one or the other, right? The 380 or the 9 Kurtz, the same cartridge. Anyway, they decided to name this 270 caliber, 277 caliber, the 6.8 Western. So that's kind of the story behind the 6.8 Western. Now, my manual, I think, came out in 2010, so the 6.8 Western is not listed in there. But we're going to look up on Hogdon. If you don't know, that's a great resources. Hodgdon. Been using them for a long, long time. They have a plethora of reloading information. But I looked up the 6.8 Western, and we're looking at 130 grain bullet at 3,137. So right on par with that if you want to shoot traditional grain bullets. But again, this is not what that cartridge was designed for. Let's look at some heavier bullets here. Let's look at 165 grain. We're looking at, and I'm just picking random loads, you're looking at 2,600 feet a second. Again, not super fast. And it won't be as flat shooting, at least inside of 500 yards, as your traditional 270. But out past that, it'll be very predictable, buck the wind well. Let's look at another one, 165 grain Nosler. We're looking at 26 again and some change. Another one. All right, 2660, a little bit hotter, but all around the 2,600 feet a second range with 160 some grain bullet. This is not spectacular. This is not mind-blowing. Again, this is along those same lines. It's not meant to be the super ultra mega magnum, right? If you want that, look at like the 28 Nosler or something. This is meant to be an efficient, heavy bullet, longer range, high BC, high sectional density, 270 caliber. All right, that being said, which one is right for you? We talked about all this. Well, let's start with the good old 270. When might the 270 be the right choice for you? Well, an easy answer, tradition, right? If you want a beautiful wood stock, blued steel, gorgeous walnut, spalted maple, something like that, right? A gorgeous, let's call it old school rifle, a rifleman's rifle. Or you want to go really old school and get an actual pre-64 Winchester Model 70. Well, the obvious choice for that is the 270, the old school, just regular 270, right? That's the most obvious choice. Another one is if you wanted a gun that was popular quite a while ago, but is not anymore, that's pretty much going to be your choice, right? The Remington 760, the Game Master, phenomenal, awesome gun. Let's say you live in a country where you can't have a semi-automatic. I have a guy that contacts me on, let's just say he contacts me and he's in Australia, right, and asks me about my opinion on things. And obviously my first answer to him for something was go to a semi-auto, and he's like, I live in Australia. And I said, oh crap, well, never mind. If you want, or if you live in a state where you can't hunt with a semi-auto and you want fast follow-up shots, that 760 pump action, very common in a 270. So if you want that gun, the 270 is going to be your answer. Also, a really cool one I saw yesterday, I went to a gun show to sell some guns because I'm trying to raise capital to keep the podcast and grow it, right? but I saw a beautiful Ruger number 1, which if you don't know is a single shot falling block in 270, I believe. Gorgeous gun. And that's a falling block, so action length doesn't exist for that, right? You put the cartridge directly into the barrel. So for that, and it's traditional and it's beautiful, let's be honest, you're not hunting with a Ruger number 1 for the most high-tech new whiz-bang thing. You're doing it because you want the beautiful tradition and the challenge of hunting with a single-shot rifle. So for that, 270 is your obvious answer. So if you like tradition, you want 270. Also, let's say for a prepper, you want to be able to stockpile ammo or be able to go to Walmart and get ammo, right? The 270 is your obvious choice. It has been around, again, since the 20s. It is amazingly popular all over the country, probably all over the world. You can get ammo for it. I waited quite a while to get a 6.5 Creedmoor. Years and years and years, because every year cartridges come out, and the vast majority of them die or are relegated to obscurity. So, but when I found out the 6.5 Creedmoor was going to be around and stay around, and it was around you'd be able to find at Walmart, I got a 6.5 Creedmoor. Anyway, the 270 is super common. You're probably going to find, if you find much ammo at all at Walmart, chances are you can find 270. So there you go. That's obvious reasons for the 270. Some big advantages there. The 6.8 Western. The 6.8 Western, obviously, if you want to shoot long range. The 6.8 Western is so new. Again, this could be a cartridge that really catches on. It could also be one of those cartridges destined to obscurity, like the 7mm STW, Shooting Times Western. They still exist. They're very rare. Or a round like the 300 Savage. A good round, you can still technically get ammo for it, but it's very, very obscure. So the 6.8 Western may fall into that category in a couple of years. I'm not really sure. I guess that's the point, is you're not really sure about ammo availability. If you're a reloader and you have the ability to stockpile a bunch of ammo and you're not worried about this being a survival preparedness rifle of any kind, then that doesn't really apply to you. And if you want to be able to shoot the 270 caliber at extended ranges, then yeah, this is probably the one for you. If you plan on shooting game out past 600-700 yards, that's not how I hunt. But that's fine. Not everybody has to be like me, right? That's not how I like to hunt. I like to spot and stalk. I like to get within a couple hundred yards of my game. So for me, that doesn't really apply to me, right? It's a moot point. But for you, if that's how you like to hunt, and I'm not going to put that down. I want as many new hunters as possible. I want this tradition and ability to feed your family to continue on. However people want to do that, right? As long as it's ethical, I don't care if you take a bow or a crossbow or a sling and a stone or a, tens of thousands of dollars side-by-side with a 20-pound rifle and an optic and a rangefinder and a kestrel and a tripod. If that's how you want to hunt, more power to you. This is the cartridge for that. Again, if you want the 270 caliber and you want to shoot long range, it'd be the 6.8 Western. Now, what about the cartridge that started me thinking about this, the 270 WSM? Well, I think if I was going to choose one, and again, I'm not buying guns right now, I haven't in quite a while, but if I was, I would probably get the 270 WSM. Why? It's good for the kind of hunting that I like to do, right? Spot and stalk hunting within 300 yards. If I see an animal out past that, I can almost always, unless there's some crazy terrain feature, get within 300 yards without those animals noticing. So, and I would rather do that than try and shoot them from a long distance. That's just me. But for me, if I was going to get a 270, and it wasn't going to be a preparedness rifle because I have other rifles for that, the 270 WSM is kind of in the middle. It's not super obscure. Like, you can easily find ammo for it. It's nowhere near as common as a 270, but enough that I can get ammo for it. And it's more efficient. It's in that short action, which my other two bolt action rifles, which I use for hunting and when I was a professional big game hunter and guide, they're all short actions, right? So I'm familiar with that. If I got it in the same pattern, there's a lot of commonality there with like scope mounts and optics and things like that. And I'm just familiar with it. My practicing my dry fire, my bolt throw would pretty much be the same. and it's more efficient. You get a little bit more power, which I really don't think translates to much on game at the distances I shoot at, but it's a more efficient cartridge. It's in that short action. It will do everything that the 270 will do in a smaller, handier rifle, and for me, that's a big deal. Like, the little bit of steel might not seem like much on a long versus a short action, but, you know, for that, I would rather have the 270 WSM, because if I can save a little bit of weight, why not? And although I love, you know, blued steel and walnut guns, I hunt hard, and I would beat the crap out of a gun like that. That's why my go-to hunting guns are stainless steel and polymer stock, because I hunt hard, right? So that's not really the kind of hunting that I like to do. It would be cool one day to have like a Ruger number 1 and 7x57 Mauser or something like that, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about, for me, for hunting, if I was going to pick one, I'd probably go the 270 WSM. If you want the 270 ballistics performance, that medium to large game, plenty of elk have been put in a freezer with a 270, a lot of elk. So there's no arguing that it doesn't put elk in the freezer, right? So let's just get off the table. If I were going to choose a .277 caliber hunting round for me in the way that I hunt, I would choose the 270 WSM. And that's just me. Anyway, I hope this was enlightening to you. I hope this, if you are looking in this market or you just want to understand the differences, hopefully this was enlightening to you. Hopefully now you better understand the differences in the cartridges. Or if you're looking at a new deer rifle this season or are trying to decide on a 270 caliber, then this might help. Anyway, with that, tactical tip of the day. Right? I don't often mention products, but these are cheap. I think I buy them online for less than $5, like free shipping and everything. I'm not going to mention any brands or anything. Some are more expensive than others, but just a cheap basic one, just like your stretchy, elastic shell carriers that go on the side of your hunting rifle. If you're going to spend the money on a hunting rifle and a bunch of other stuff, get one of these and put it on your rifle. And keep shells in it. Keep cartridges in it. Keep your 270 rounds in it. Or whatever caliber. If you are not into 270, you listen to today just for the knowledge, I appreciate that. But keep those in there for a couple of reasons. Just like with a shotgun, if you practice with it, it can be relatively fast to grab a round out of there and throw it in the chamber and ram that bolt home. If for whatever reason you should happen to run out of ammo in your whether it's a box magazine or an internal magazine in your hunting rifle, right, you can quickly throw another cartridge in there. Another big advantage of this is, and I can tell you that I've done this before, right, I have, a lot of times I'll walk on a road, on a logging road or something, or walk down a road to get to where I'm going to go off-road to go hunting, and it's illegal to hunt off a road, so I start off with my gun unloaded. And then I will go and load my gun up when I get off the road. Well, I have, in times past, forgotten to load my gun when I went off-road. I got distracted, I saw an animal or something, and time would go on, and I would hunt all morning or a big chunk of the day, and there would be no round in my gun. There would be no rounds in my gun. If that were to happen and I had a side saddle, it's not considered loaded if I have rounds in it. Again, I could very quickly, if the opportunity presented itself, grab a round out of there, throw it in the chamber, ram the bolt home, and I may or may not get a decent shot at that animal, but it's a lot more likely than if I just don't have anything on there. Also, if you keep rounds in there and you forget altogether, like you forget your box of ammo, I've seen that happen. We'll just literally, for whatever reason, we forget stuff all the time, your wallet, whatever. Forget to put a box of ammo in your weapon and you don't travel with it loaded, so you drive all the way there, you open up your thing and realize you forgot your ammo. Well, at least you have 5 rounds or whatever in your side saddle. Hopefully you zeroed your gun before you left. Anyway, they're like $5. They're a good thing to have. If it's super cold, you can get the neoprene ones. I do really like those, but generally I just go with the $5 ones. Pretty much every shotgun I have or whatever has one on there. They also make the slings. I don't like those as much because to me they're not as fast to load from, but they make those. Those are an option, like the neoprene slings with the cartridge carriers on there. Anyway, that's your tactical tip of the day. Those cartridge carriers. Hopefully what you've been waiting for, the tactical verse of the day from Romans 4. It shall be imputed to us who believe in him who raised up Jesus our Lord from the dead, who was delivered up because of our offenses and was raised because of our justification. Therefore, having been justified by faith, we have peace with God through our Lord Jesus Christ. This is gunfighter life. We have the power as men to take life. Hopefully justly, hopefully for a good reason, like putting meat on the table, or to prevent further loss of life, murder, things like that. We have the ability to take life, but God has the ability to give life and to raise the dead. Our power is nothing compared to the power of God. Remember that. Seek justice, love mercy, walk humbly with your God. Thanks for listening, and have a blessed day. Attention, attention. There is a Patreon giveaway thanks to a current patron. They agreed to give up one of their very nice knives in a raffle for new patrons. So if you've been convicted, you've listened for a while, you think you want to become a patron of Gunfighter Life or the Alpha Male podcast, perhaps this will be that push you've been looking for. It is a K-Bar Folding Hunter. Now, K-Bar is a good knife company, and I don't think I have to explain that if you're into this kind of stuff. K-Bar is a legendary knife company. This is a very good knife that looks very suitable for EDC. Now, I don't know how big you think this group is, but I have less than a dozen patrons at the time of this recording. And that's total. So who knows how many will join this month. So I'd say if you want to join, your chances are probably pretty good. I made a post on Patreon. You can go to the Patreon page without being a patron. Some stuff is just for patrons. In fact, most stuff is just for patrons. But there's a few videos on there you can watch that are just for the public, for everybody. And I did a post for the public, for everybody. So if you want to go see the details or see a picture of this knife, go over to Patreon. It is the main source of income for this podcast.